turn lane along 202, and the PennDOT HOP unit has deemed within meeting minutes and discussions that the 202 and 926 PennDOT project may be relied upon for traffic impact mitigation if necessary. So although there is no traffic impact, the applicant can also incorporate those improvements that are planned by PennDOT as part of the mitigation plan if necessary.
And the improvements that you're talking about is the collector road that goes through the property?
Correct, primarily the collector road, which allows the traffic to be distributed throughout more than just the intersection of 926 and 202.
And then there's the intersection at 926 and the collector road. What was being proposed there again?
So what is proposed at that intersection is dedicated turn lanes, both left and right, to turn into the collector road from 926, as well as signalization.
Okay, and that's again something PennDOT needs to review and approve, right?
Correct, and based on the study, they are in agreement with what is proposed pending detailed engineering.
Okay, and what about the other end of the collector road? I believe that's the one that was discussed a lot at the last meeting, as well as in Al's most recent review letter. What is, as part of the current plan, required at that intersection?
So as part of the current plan, what is required to achieve acceptable levels of service is stop control on the collector road approach. And we do have a figure that we have pulled from the submitted traffic study that illustrates what those levels of service are. That's it, Jeff. So at the intersection at the top right corner of the page, that is West Pleasant Grove Road across the page and the collector road north and south. And what is being demonstrated here is stop control on the collector road approach and free flow along West Pleasant Grove Road. And with those operations, the levels of service, which is the measurement of delay for drivers, is overall level of service A, which is the best level of service, and then level of service A for the movements in the morning, and level of service B for the movements in the afternoon, which is highly acceptable.
And that's just with one stop sign, right?
Correct.
Okay. Are other stop signs warranted there? And if you could explain how that process works.
So we did look preliminarily at the warrants for an all-way stop. That would be the safest intersection traffic control that could be provided here. There are certain traffic volume criteria that you need to meet. And as we have estimated it, we do not believe that it will satisfy those warrants. Of course, we do our best to estimate. It could be slightly different. We've been conservative, I think, in estimating a little high to make sure that we're not missing anything, but that's where we stand with the warrants currently.
Okay. Now, notwithstanding that analysis, the Toll Brothers look at providing some other type of access improvement.
Yes, based on comments through various township review letters and meetings, there was a concern about traffic calming brought up along West Pleasant Grove Road.
The mini one, Jeff, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You just passed it.
That
That's it.
We did look at incorporating a mini roundabout at this location. So as depicted on the conceptual plan that is currently being shown, this demonstrates a mini roundabout at the intersection where West Pleasant Grove Road is running diagonally across the page, as Andrew is highlighting, and then generally north-south we have the collector road. So what is being shown here is a circular intersection which would promote slower travel speeds. You can see the way that the approaches along West Pleasant Grove Road have some curvature that forces the slower speeds. We are providing pedestrian crossings, and obviously larger vehicles will need to traverse this intersection, including primarily school buses, and this intersection control does accommodate those by the dot in the middle. The yellow dot is a mountable median area, which would be utilized by larger vehicles to traverse the intersection as necessary.
And I think we have a picture of what that would look like, that mountable center.
So we have an example of a mini roundabout that is nearby. The pictures, the blue icon.
Down the bottom. Keep going.
There you go.
Yep, okay.
So this is a mini roundabout in the area, which is similar in size and provides a mountable median area. It is not something that a passenger vehicle would be particularly comfortable driving over, and so that keeps them off of it. But it's something that's very easy for a school bus or a larger truck to drive over when necessary.
Okay, and again, what's the benefit of having the mini roundabout at this intersection?
So it does provide safety benefits. It does provide a means to force traffic to slow down. And it is also compact enough that it does not have significant impacts outside of the existing right-of-way.
Okay, and let's look at I believe the Planning Commission wanted us to analyze what a full roundabout would look like and what impacts may occur. I assume we did do that, and that was what we submitted last month. So if you could highlight what's being shown here.
Sure. So you can see highlighted in blue, that is where the plan currently shows the collector road accessing an intersection West Pleasant Grove Road. In order to provide a roundabout, a traditional roundabout is what we typically refer to it as. We needed to shift it significantly to the west in order to maintain it within property that Toll Brothers controls, both to the west and also to the south, as it is significantly larger in scale versus what we just looked at with the mini roundabout. Within a traditional roundabout, the central island, which here is the darker red color, the circle in the center, is not mountable. And so that's why this intersection control is so much larger, because it requires that school buses and larger trucks circulate around the center median. So it becomes much larger, and there are significant disturbed areas within this portion of the property that have primary and secondary conservation elements.
Right, and you're not the site engineer, Jeff, as he's down there, but we've highlighted those impacts on the plan here. It would disturb over an acre of woodlands. This is one of the most wooded portions of the property. It also runs through a perennial stream. Impacts a certain amount of steep slope areas, approximately 3,400 square feet of steep slopes, as well as encroaching into the riparian buffer. So there's no other location on the site that Toll owns where we could move this and have that connection, is that right?
There is not. This is the only way it could be provided within property that the applicant controls. And when considering the safety aspect, I think, which has come up probably most frequently about this location, the two-way stop control intersection that is proposed on the plan, meaning stop control on the collector road, is a safe and appropriate intersection control type. As you implement a roundabout, including the mini, you do get some benefit to safety, but as I said, the highest and most significant safety benefit would be always stop by far.
Okay, and in your opinion, is there any reason why a roundabout, mini or full, is actually necessary?
No.
There were a couple other intersections, and I don't think we have any plans for them, but they were dealing with the West Pleasant Grove Road intersections into the development. And I think one of the comments was still dealing with site distances. Have those been analyzed, and do we have those details on plans currently?
So at this point, the widening that's proposed along West Pleasant Grove Road is depicted on the latest plans, which demonstrates that the applicant will widen along their frontage and provide the width per the township's classification as a collector road on their half width of the roadway. So that is depicted on the plan, and we've demonstrated through field observations and measurements that with those improvements and the clearing that will occur along the property, that site distance will be achieved. But to demonstrate that further, we will be providing vertical profiles to further demonstrate that available site distance is adequate.
And then the other improvement that I don't think we've talked about is southbound Route 202 as you approach West Pleasant Grove Road. What's proposed there and what will the toll be doing?
Yeah, so what is proposed by the applicant is to provide a dedicated southbound right turn lane along 202 for traffic that is turning onto West Pleasant Grove Road. And so to this point, because there haven't been concerns about the need for right-of-way that is not controlled by the applicant, a plan has not been prepared, but we will do that.
Okay. That's very quick.
Sure.
No plan has been prepared yet for the right turn southbound lane coming down from 202 to West Pleasant Grove Road, but we will put one together. There's adequate right-of-way available for the right-hand turn. We'll demonstrate that by putting together a conceptual plan. PennDOT hasn't asked for it yet?
No, they have not asked for anything there.
But I believe Al made a comment about it in the letter, so we got to prepare it anyway, so we'll do
Well,
it.
I thought was out, you are contemplating making your traffic study.
We are correct, but the others, the conceptual plans were prepared because we needed to coordinate with property owners for right-of-way. Since that's not the condition here, the applicant is fully proposing them with no constraints of that nature. But we will put together the illustrative plan for further information.
So Nicole, just I guess, instead of going point by point, Al had issued a letter July 2nd, revised July 6th, that I know you've reviewed. If you just wanted to highlight a couple of the items in there rather than going point by point, and I'm sure Al will bring whatever other issues he'd like to discuss up when he's presented.
Yes, I have two items to cover, the one of which we have already covered. There were comments regarding the intersection of West Pleasant Grove Road and the Collector Road, so we did want to go back through that discussion on the different options for traffic control, what is proposed, what was initially proposed, what the applicant is willing to install in terms of the mini roundabout in that discussion. The other item in the letter that I wanted to bring up is item 1B2. And there are parts 1 and 2 to that comment. It is referencing verifying the traffic analysis inputs at the intersection of 926 and New Street. Al noted that there was a significant change in the delay on some of the movements between the without development and with development conditions. Certainly a review seemed to be counterintuitive because of the increase in volume. We did take a look at that. As I mentioned, PennDOT is requiring us to interconnect the traffic signals, and as soon as we do that, it changes the functionality of the intersections. So those changes are as a direct result of us going from an uncoordinated signal condition to a coordinated signal condition, and that is as required by PennDOT. So that changes the signal parameters and the way it functions, and that is the reason for the change. So when we provide a formal response to Al's letter, we will include that analysis so that that is clear where those changes are occurring. The other comment, number 2, under that same section is related in that Al was questioning whether PennDOT would approve the coordination of the signals along 926 as proposed in the study, which, as I mentioned, are interconnecting the signal at New Street and the signal at the Collector Road. That is being done in direct response to a requirement from PennDOT. So we have been given no indication from PennDOT that they want those signals to be part of the Route 202 coordinated system, but we are following up with them to confirm that there wasn't anything missed in that correspondence. But their comment directly states, interconnect the 926 signals at New Street and the Collector Road, and that's what we've done. So those were the technical comments that I wanted to make sure that we covered, since I think we had some additional information to share.
And that's it? Okay. That's all we have. just to bring everybody up to speed on where we are with respect to the traffic improvements and traffic studies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go out, and you pick up, and pull that off, and then we ask questions, whatever.
Thank you. Whoa, okay. With respect, just try to catch up on some of the things. I guess I need to wipe it off.
You don't need to wipe it off, you kept your mask.
Okay, thank you. Just to be clear, you had submitted in May a revised traffic study to the township. Has that been shared with PennDOT yet? So any conclusions or things that PennDOT stated to date are still subject to review of the new traffic study?
There was nothing in there that was changed that they have not already signed off on. It was primarily text changes and addressing those types of comments from the township, expanding and clarifying some items. So there's no reason, there's no technical information that PennDOT has not been privy to.
So the revised traffic studies for the Planning Commission's benefit, the revised traffic study did update and revise the analysis of 926 and 202. I'm sorry, 926 and New Street. And those were the last two comments that Nicole was commenting on. So PennDOT has not seen that revised analysis to the best of my knowledge. With respect to how they analyzed it and all of these benefits that are being purported to result from the signal coordination, PennDOT's actual comment was to connect the signals with fiber and integrate them into the department's software. At least on the last PennDOT review I've seen, and the last formal review they've issued is from December, there was nothing about coordinating them, but I'm probably diving a little into the weeds. I would just summarize it to say that I think the magnitude of the impact, if there is an impact on 926 and new, is still an issue that's outstanding. Regarding the design for the widening that Nicole started with at 926 and 202, my recollection of those conversations was that the preference was to go to the south to avoid the tree to the north. But there is a thought, and PennDOT has expressed this, that that entire improvement could be completed within the right-of-way. I don't know what PennDOT's response is going to be if the SPACmen say no. The last thing I had seen from them was that they expressed a very strong preference that if there's a widening, it goes to the north. But it does not sound like this has been explored or spoken with anybody on the northwest corner. So it's possible that this still happens in some way. Maybe it doesn't. A lot of that's going to be up to PennDOT to determine. Regarding West Pleasant Grove and the Collector Road, Jeff, would you be so kind as to go to the mini roundabout concept? Thank you. So, as you can see, this is shifted, presented on the alignment of the existing connector road. It does actually extend across the frontage of the church and impacts their driveway. As Nicole mentioned, larger vehicles would have to go over the center island in consideration of the number of school buses and other vehicles going through there. I'm still recommending the full roundabout. Jeff, would you be so kind to just go that one as well? I will defer to the solicitor, the board of supervisors on how the code actually addresses the impact. It does seem that there is some discretion from the board if they believe it's appropriate to permit these levels of impacts. I would note that this could probably be shifted over a little to the east and have about the same impact on the adjacent property that the mini roundabout concept had, and that may further, very likely would further lessen these impacts. To my knowledge, other than providing these concepts to the church, I'm not sure if there's been any dialogue with them about what agreement they may have or to coordinate with that. If the concern is the environmental impacts and the church is willing to participate in this, then this could conceivably be shifted east and provided. I would note, unlike always stop signs, there are no actual warrants that are used regularly to declare when a roundabout should be in. Many times it is judgment-based, and I think based on a number of issues, this is still the preferred concept for this access. Other than that, in the July 6th letter, which I'm not sure the Planning Commission has in the hard copy, I did provide, no, that's July, that's an earlier draft, an opinion, okay, on, no, that, I was just checking to see, okay, yeah, that's the one, okay. So I don't know if the Planning Commission has any further questions. Are there anything else you'd like me to touch on, Kristen? I mean, I think by and large, my impression is the recommendations that we discussed at the previous Planning Commission meeting would still generally address. I do prefer this current alternate plan with the revised internal circulation. I do think this addresses the concerns that were expressed. And again, it does take the one access, which the Planning Commission, I think, discussed, making that an emergency access. That's reflected on here as well.
Okay, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission now to gather their thoughts and ask questions of either Nicole or Al regarding what we've just discussed.
I guess I'll start. So what happens if the proposed right-of-way acquisition at the northeast corner of Skyland Boulevard and 202 can't be acquired?
So Skiles in 202 was an issue identified by PennDOT. If PennDOT determines that to be a level of service impact that requires mitigation, and they are unable to obtain the right-of-way, PennDOT may ask them to make some other improvement via an alternate transportation plan.
Al, I have a question about that. You haven't mentioned that at all in your review. Is that not something that, I know it's PennDOT Road, but is that something that you would want them to do? It doesn't mean.
I have no objection to this modification.
But the modification can't be achieved.
If the modification can't be achieved, then we, if PennDOT believes that this is an impact that needs to be mitigated, then there would need to be exploration of other improvements. There may be something that's done elsewhere in lieu of this. It's, dependent on whether they get the right of way.
mitigate the issue here or mitigate traffic in other areas adjacent to the property?
It could be either.
My second question was, on one of the plans, there's a proposed pedestrian crossing in the area, it looks like, where either the mini or the full roundabout will be built. I can't see it identified anywhere on either one of the drawings depicting the roundabouts. On your land development plan, there's a proposed pedestrian crossing the northeast corner of the site.
So my understanding, and Andrew, jump in if I'm misstating this, is that Toll Brothers has committed to providing a connection or going to the Arborview connection, but they have expressed concerns about doing work on someone else's property. And my hope would be that if we can, if this moves forward, if we can work with the property owner to get permission, then maybe it gets done. But Toll Brothers at this point did not seem inclined to engage to get those rights to make that connection.
We're only going to make the connection to where we can in the right-of-way that's available. So I think there's a short stretch that's privately owned there.
Okay, Jim, do you have a question?
We don't have access to the letter. You say it's July 6th. We don't have this July 6th letter.
Some of the planning commission members do. It looks like July 2nd draft was printed out and the July 2nd revised.
The July 2nd letter that I have shows that there are several outstanding items on that list. How many of those have been corrected?
Those items are incorporated into the July 6th revision. I think the most significant of those was relative to 926 and New Street that's been discussed. I did not mention this, when Nicole spoke about the site distance, the last time this came up at the Planning Commission meeting, you had indicated that the measurements had been made based on the existing edge of roadway. Have they been updated based on the widening?
So that was what I mentioned. When we formally respond to this letter, it will include vertical profiles. That's the only way we can look at the proposed improvements to basically reinforce what we've measured in the field to further demonstrate with the improvements as requested, site distance will be available.
So I would say at this point, yeah, 926 and New Street and the site distance are still open issues.
Anything else?
No, but I don't think it's very clear which of these items have been addressed. Because there were several on the letter of July 2nd. Until we know if they've been addressed, it's pretty hard for us to make a decision.
The outstanding items, I would say that the more significant ones are 1.3, which is the site distance. 1.4 and 1.5 are code requirements that the applicant has indicated. These are cost estimates and implementation strategy that they will consider once the actual scope of improvements are established. I would defer to Kristen if that's something from a conditional use perspective that needs to be considered. Right. So then we have the issues that were spoken about 926 and 202. I'm sorry, I keep saying that, 926 and New Street that are outstanding. Greg mentioned the exhibit for the West Pleasant Grove Road deceleration lane from 202. Traffic calming on the internal collector road. The applicants requested a deferred land development. At this point, if that becomes a condition of the approval, that can be worked out then. Yeah, and then just coordinating appropriately with the church regarding, this access or the intersection of Connector Road and 202, and as well as a place for the church to take access later. The church, at least in initial conversation, indicated there may be a preference to a connection to the southern parking lot, which is not shown on this plan. But again, I think that's something that's addressed in the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Let me try this microphone and see how bad it is. Okay. Now, as I understand it, your preference is for a full...
As I understand it, your preference is for a full traffic circle,
Yes, roundabout.
a full roundabout.
That is correct.
And the, is it my understanding from, I'm sorry, is Devine? I forgot your name.
I call it fine.
I apologize. Is it my understanding that even if we use the location for the mini roundabout, you can't put the full roundabout in that location?
No.
And why is that?
It would have much more significant impacts to the church property than the mini roundabout would have, and still likely impacting the environmental features on the applicant site.
Nicole, can you explain why?
Due to the size, and also, it's not just the concern about impacting the church property, we also cannot encroach on any property to the north. So it's very kind of prescribed for us and what the constraints are of where this needs to go. Sure. So in addition to, as I mentioned, the larger roundabout being just that, much larger, it also has different design criteria. And you can see from the diagram how much more curvature there is on the approaches. So not only do we have to provide a much larger circle, but we have to shift the alignment of the roadway, being West Pleasant Grove Road, much more significantly for this size of a roundabout versus the mini roundabout.
And what's the problem with shifting Pleasant Grove Road?
The impacts to the properties and the impacts to the environmental features on the applicant's site.
You provide us with what the impact was environmentally on the original proposal, but we don't have anything that shows what the impact is of trying to put that larger roundabout in the location where the mini roundabout is.
We don't own the property. If you put it in the center where the mini roundabout is, it would be on multiple other property that Toll is in control. So we didn't even go there because that's out beyond our control.
Right. What I was talking about was to keep that roundabout on Toll Brothers property.
Well, you can't and keep it in that location. You can't put a full roundabout in the same location as the T intersection or the mini roundabout. It will go all over the place. It'll go onto the church property. It'll force you to go onto the Arborview property. It'll force you to go all over because of the way that roads have to curve in and the size of the roundabout itself. So what we did was we looked at the closest location where we could put a full roundabout on the property within our controlled property area and the public right-of-way. So that exhibit that you have there, that's the best that we can do without going on somebody else's property. So that, I hope that explains why we didn't show it in the other location.
They show on that plan.
So on the top, can you show the ordinance sections? Greg and I disagree on the interpretation of the zoning ordinance as to whether or not they would need variance relief to be able to build this full roundabout. I read section 1617C and section 404 differently than he does. I think that the board of supervisors, if they really wanted to see this happen, could allow the encroachments into the primary and secondary conservation areas. But as I think Al mentioned, that's really an interpretation issue for board of supervisors. But I think from a planning perspective, what I would like the planning commission to do is, if the ordinance allowed it, because they are obviously not going to put themselves in a position where they need to get variance relief, but if the ordinance allowed it, and if the board of supervisors was counseled that, you know, the interpretation I think that you could have is appropriate, would you want to see the full roundabout? I think that's the question for the planning commission.
Right, well, and I disagree with respect to the ordinance sections, because they say it's only if it's necessary, and there's been no showing that a full roundabout is necessary. But notwithstanding that is the language, but we'll disagree to disagree. My point of not bringing up the zoning provisions was to have the planning commission look at it from a practical perspective and not from a legal perspective. And the practical perspective was that right now all that's necessary and needed there is a stop sign, one stop sign. You could add 2 more stop signs. But going from a single stop sign to a full roundabout is a huge jump. So the median ground of the mini roundabout was to address what Al's comments were with respect to adding some additional traffic calming and some aesthetics. Putting a full roundabout and taking away an acre of woodlands and invading steep slopes and going over a perennial stream is not necessary here. That's the practical perspective.
No word necessary.
I'm not applying